Hello and welcome to this week's Preps Preview. I'm Justin Conn and this is Scott Richey. We're going to switch gears a little bit and actually talk about girls basketball first with, the girls kind of take the center stage this week with the boys season being a little bit in that area where the conference tournaments are over and a lot of the conference races are sort of decided. This is, girls regional week and, there's some really good regional finals out there. Scott, is there one that you kind of look at as what's the most interesting regional final you see out on a docket there?
I mean, there's several that I listed. That like I said, we have a good slate. The one that kind of sticks out maybe the most to me is Central A&M and Nokomis, and they've already played once this year, and several of these are going to be rematches. Sullivan, plays Arthur again. Arcola plays Neoga again, but A&M Nokomis, the Raiders won the first matchup and are playing probably, the best basketball of any of our area teams. A couple losses here and there, but, they have, just up and down the lineup, girls that can score, and, they dropped 80-plus in their semifinal win against South Fork, so, they, got out and ran, in their semifinal win, and that's something that Coach Tom Dooley said, if they can do that against Nokomis, should be in good shape. But Nokomis, they have, a player in Ashley Snyder that could give A&M some trouble. She's 5'10", and A&M, size is not their strength. So if she has a monster game, A&M could struggle a little bit. It's just going to be interesting to see kind of who dictates the pace and style of that game.
That is the one I picked as well, and we'll try to talk about a couple of others too. But I really find that game fascinating just because, they played early in the season, and A&M won 61-52. They had a big second quarter, which is sort of A&M's thing and that's been like that really since, Tom Dooley's been there, where they'll have, a quarter where their press will just break you down and they'll go on a huge run and kind of hold you off from there. And that's really been the formula for success. I like this A&M team better than some of the past teams in the half court. I saw some things earlier this year from them that I really liked as far as their ball movement and some of the things they do with their guards. Size is, like you said, is an issue for them, and if it's just a pure half-court game, I do think that's trouble for them. They do have to get out and run some, but I think that just that improved half-court game really is an advantage. Does help them in the postseason because that's hurt them in the past. They've had years like the year they lost to Altamont, and even against they couldn't quite get that big quarter against Cowden Herrick last year. And it'll come back to hurt them sometimes, but I think they're playing their best basketball this season right now, like you said. Nokomis has played a tougher schedule, though.
Sure.
And, when you start seeing teams that, are better and you go against their presses and things like that, it does make a difference. You're a little more prepared for what A&M's doing. Because I've seen teams go against A&M in a postseason where they just hadn't played against that, that fast and that physical of a team before, and Nokomis has seen it. So, I do think that helps Nokomis out. And, it's at Nokomis. So, they'll be a little more comfortable there too. So, that's a really interesting game. You mentioned the Arcola Neoga regional final as well, which is a lot of fun just because, Taylor Edwards, I think, is right now playing as well as any individual player in the area. But Neoga has, kind of two players with Jillian Dieters and E.C. Thies. I think Dieters gives Arcola a lot of trouble just because of her size, and Arcola's not. They're not big, They play, always play that good hard-nosed man-to-man defense. That's sort of that they've, hung their success on over the years. But if they can't find any scoring outside of Edwards, they'll be in trouble. And I think that can be hit and miss for them. Another really good regional final, like you mentioned, is the Clinton Bloomington Central Catholic game, which is at Warrensburg. I don't know a ton about Central Catholic. Obviously, Clinton is a team we do know a lot about and has been so good these past couple of years with that group of girls that's now juniors and then Haley Toohill as a senior. And I really do feel like this team is built to have success in the postseason, but man, you just really couldn't ask for a tougher postseason path than what they have with a team that's just perennially good like Central Catholic, and if they were able to get past them, then St. Thomas More in the sectional. So it's unfortunate, but and it's just kind of tough to call what's going to happen in that regional final with two teams that maybe haven't seen each other.
Yeah, and Clinton had to get through Moreau Forsyth in the regional semifinal, and they did. They won by I think it was 9 points. So Yeah, it was a tough slate, from the get-go from the Maroons, but I think the way they've been playing this year, and winning some big games. They beat A&M for the OCA tournament title. They've beaten Sullivan a couple times now. They have the skill and the talent, and maybe just enough going right for them this year that they could be able to knock off Central Catholic. St. Thomas More in the sectional is a whole other story. They have one of the best players in the state in Tori McCoy, who's getting some serious D1 looks, and at 6'4", 6'5", I'm not exactly sure how tall she is. She's taller than I am, but she causes a lot of trouble for a lot of teams. So that is a little unfortunate.
And Clinton is a team that isn't deep. They don't. I mean, that starting five is as good as anybody in the area, but they're not deep, and they have a tough game against Maroa. That's got to be one of the tougher regional semis in the area because Maroa was no slouch. So that's another thing maybe kind of going against Clinton a little bit is not a lot of depth and then having to bounce back fairly quickly from a pretty tough game. So we'll switch gears now back to the boys a little bit. Like I said, it's a little bit kind of that part of the season where regional seeds and pairings are getting ready to come out, and we'll have a lot to talk about once that happens. But I want to real quick bring up a team that has had a lot of success this year, but has fallen short in a couple of big games, which maybe worries you a little bit, and that's St. Teresa. Obviously, I think Christian Williams, in my opinion right now, is the best player in the area. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of people who argue for Marcus Bartley from MacArthur, and that's a good argument. But Williams really has taken his game to another level at times this season. But outside of him, you don't necessarily have a guy you can say, okay, if Christian's not going, or if a team's just putting everything on Christian, who's going to step up for them? And I think that is a concern going forward into the postseason for them. And I think we've seen it exploited a couple of times now in tournaments and tournament play. And I guess as a St. Teresa fan, are you worried about them going into the postseason?
For a long time, I wasn't, because any team with Christian Williams, the best player in the area, that gives them a leg up. But and they lose to Warrensburg in the Macon County tournament semis, lose to Sullivan in the OCA tournament semifinals. I mean, these kind of higher pressure, bigger games, and they're not quite getting it done. It kind of made me look at their regional field again and just wonder, well, maybe they're not just such an overwhelming favorite. Warrensburg is going to be in that regional. They've already beaten St. Teresa. Cerro Gordo, Bement is going to be in that regional. And, if Connor Gross, he recently had an 8 3-pointer game, and, if he has a night like that, that's going to be tough to stop. So, they went from, in my mind, okay, kind of, pencil St. T in for, sectionals to, well, maybe I can't do that anymore.
Right. Well, and you look at the field, Warrensburg's beat them and played them in another pretty close game. Cerro Gordo Bement went down to the wire with them in their game at the St. Teresa Holiday Tournament. So these are teams that aren't going to be intimidated going in. They've played St. Teresa and know they can hang with them. And to me, it's going to take somebody else for St. Teresa to kind of step up. John Radley definitely is a sophomore who has that capability. I think he's a guy who gives either Warrensburg or Cerro Gordo a lot of problems if he's playing at his best, and that's been a little bit hit or miss. When he's on, he's a difference maker. And then at that same time they probably still need somebody else. Early in the season Jordan Lakaitis was doing a little scoring, and his scoring hasn't been as much lately. And we saw Devin Adcock pouring 15 the other night. I know that's a guy from talking to Troy Hayes, who does color for St. Teresa Radio, who he thought could be more of a contributor this year, and so they need that. They need somebody to kind of step in and do that. They had the transfer Patrick Altoff had a nice game. Only 5 points, but showed a pretty good floor game when they beat Tuscola in the third place game at the Ocala Valley Conference tournament. So. They're going to need something else, though. No question about it. If I don't think regional title was where they wanted to stop. They wanted to go even further than that. But if they're, to even get that or past that, they're going to need more than just, obviously more than Williams, and probably even more than Williams and Radley going forward. As we kind of head into the postseason here a little bit, there's some teams that I don't know that anybody's like just coming out and saying, announcing their presence. Maybe Arthur Levington and a few other teams, but is there a team that you kind of look at as needs to put a good foot forward here now, down in these last couple weeks of the season as we head into the postseason?
The team that really came to mind for me was Teutopolis. They had a rough January. They went 4-5, and that's a stretch that's not very common. The last few years are truly ever for T-Town. But they were without Cody Will, their point guard, who I guess I didn't realize how important he was to that team. And just talking with some of the players and Coach Andy Fehrenbacher after they really handed it to St. Anthony last week. He's the guy that's been the leader of that senior group since they were in 6th grade. So, with him back and pretty close to 100% healthy, that makes a difference. And they have kind of not an easy slate in their last 3 games. They play number 4 ranked in 2A Monmouth Roseville this Friday, so that's going to be probably one of the better games in the state.
They just picked up out of nowhere just to play somebody good.
Charleston couldn't get their game against T-Town rescheduled, so Monmouth had an opening, and Fehrenbacher knows their coach, and was like, well, let's just meet in Champaign and do this. And that's that's kind of a state tournament caliber game right there. Yeah. So that's going to be tough. They play Mount Zion, in a shootout at T-Town. And Mount Zion, a better year than expected. And so and they have some shooters that can let them hang with T-Town. And then T-Town wraps it up with their kind of now annual end of the year game against Madison, who's ranked in 1A, and will be a different team speed wise and athleticism wise than the Shoes have played all year. So if they can come out of that with 2 wins, maybe if they get all 3, they're going to be in the best shape possible. 2 is pretty good, and even if they struggle to win but play these games close against Monmouth and against Madison, I think they'll be on kind of the right foot going into the regionals.
And you look at 2A, and at least going into the postseason, it doesn't look like there's any juggernaut. There doesn't look like a team where you're like, oh man, I don't want to play them. That's the team. That's the team that's going to make it. So I feel like T-Town is still, if they can get it together, they can be a team that makes a run to state. We talked about them a long time ago as a team that I kind of felt like was the area's best chance, and I still kind of feel that way. Even after some of the struggles they had, they're a postseason tested group, and without that kind of dominant team that will stand in our way, I really think they can still make a run. And like you said, if they can kind of get on a little start it into the regular season, that always helps. For me, I think Meridian, I don't know that this is a team that you can necessarily look out for and say, oh man, they can really make some noise, but that regional is winnable. You talk about the other teams are Auburn, Pana, Shelbyville. These are teams that Meridian can beat. Auburn has played better recently and probably is going to be the number 1 seed, especially after Meridian lost to Sullivan in the regional or in the Ocala tournament finals. And Meridian's a team that has a guy in Brock Snarsky who's probably after Christian Williams and Marcus Bartley, probably the 3rd best player in the county, and can really fill it up. And they have a couple of pretty good sophomores that I really think that will be the key for them. If Drake Baker and Judah Renfro can kind of get into playing more like juniors now than sophomores, that would be big for them. But I remember last year we talked a little bit about Meridian. They didn't win that regional last year, but they can win that regional. I think almost any team in that group can win that regional, but Meridian can do it. But they have to play better this last couple weeks of the season. They can't make the mistakes, some of the mental mistakes they've been making. And just offensively, they have to have something besides Snarsky. And I think Baker and Renfro are 2 guys that can give that to them, as well as Braden Barnes. All those guys kind of show flashes, but they need to do it consistently for Meridian to be a player in that regional. Yeah,
it's a weird regional. You can't say that there's going to be just an overwhelming favorite there. Pana, they can drop 100 on you one night and then not even top 60 the next. Yeah. They're kind of back and forth with this new offense they're running, but if they're on, watch out, they'll just drop 3s on you all night. Shelbyville has kind of really struggled since Christmas, but they have some size that could give other teams trouble. Quentin Williams, Luke McConnell are 2 big guys that are kind of double waiting to happen. And then like I said, Auburn could be likely number 1 seed, but maybe not a number 1 that's going to say, well, okay, there's your number 1, they're going to win.
Right, absolutely. And it's also a bunch of teams that are kind of unfamiliar with each other, which I remember talking quite a bit about that last year where, Pana, Meridian, and those, they don't see Pana or Auburn, and Auburn doesn't see Pana and Shelbyville. So it's a weird mix of teams, and I think it kind of makes for a fun regional, but I think it's really stressful for those coaches involved in that regional, from seeding to preparing, on down. So, a lot of interesting basketball left to play here in the season. Of course, we have wrestling postseason going on right now as well. So, kind of been a weird winter as far as the weather goes, but everything's kind of coming down to it now, and we're going to get have a great ending here to the winter season. Make sure you check us out on hrpreps.com. Of course, HR Preps on Twitter, on Facebook as well. We'll see you out at the games.